They used a whistle on me the way folks call a dog. 2 quick clicks from the back porch, and I was expected to trot across the sand and scrap metal like I had paws instead of blistered heels. It was my 18th birthday, though no one said happy anything. At Whitlow Metals on the far edge of Sunfield, New Mexico, birthdays meant longer shifts and colder coffee. I wore Hank's old army jacket that still smelled like diesel in bad moods. And I was halfway through a midnight round when the sedan rolled up slow. Lights off. Dust rising behind it like a ghost that did not know where to settle. A woman stepped out. Steady as courthouse marble. "I'm Laura Finch," she said, voice low and careful. "I'm your lawyer." I laughed because that sounded like a prank we could not afford. "I do not have a lawyer," I told her. She opened a folder, and the moon hit a page at just the right angle for me to read my name. Except it was not the one Hank and Marla drilled into me. Julian Pierce. The paper said, "Beneficiary." Below it, another line. Pierce Meridian Holdings. The words after that knocked the breath out of me harder than any punch Hank had ever thrown. Estimated value $400 million. I could feel the whistle in my pocket. I could feel the old bruises under the jacket. "That is not possible," I said. But Laura kept going. Like a nurse who has to remove a splinter no matter how loud a kid cries. "Your father, Graham Pierce, made a will. Your mother, Vivian, never stopped looking. There is a private investigator. There is DNA. There is a judge who will read this if we can get you safely away from here." I looked back at the trailer where the porch light flickered, where Marla had written chore lists in black marker and underlined my name twice like I was a mistake she wanted to make permanent. "Why me?" I asked. But what I meant was, "Why now?" Laura closed the folder. "Because you turn 18 today," she said. "Because they cannot sign for you anymore. Because this is the moment they lose their leash." I slid the whistle into my palm and did not blow it. I am 28 now, and I can still taste the metal in that air. The way fear sits on the tongue like a penny you tried not to swallow. Back then I answered to Reed Whitlow. Because that is what they put on the school forms, and the timesheets, and the little Christmas tag that always read practical socks. My sister and brother in that trailer, Brooke and Chase, never ran out of glitter or gasoline. Favoritism is a quiet cruelty. It rarely yells, but it has a long reach. Hank ran the family business with a red pen and a mean grin. Marla called herself the accounting department and the prayer circle. I called them parents in public because it kept the peace. In private I used no word at all. The open loop started the second Laura said my real name. She slipped a burner phone into my palm and a folded note with a time and a place. She did not ask me to trust her. She asked me if I was tired of swallowing sand. I watched her tail lights dissolve and waited for the porch door to slam. It did. Hank's boots hit the steps like a judge's gavel. "Reed," he called, pretending at a father's concern. "You forget to check the south fence." I said I was on my way. The south fence is where the coyotes slide through. And it is also where the bad deals get done. I knew because I had eyes. And a boy who is used like a guard dog sees everything. In the morning, which in our house meant before the sun and after the shouting, Marla slid a piece of cake across the laminate as if the gesture could pass for love. The frosting said happy and then stopped because someone ran out of icing or interest. My birthday was often forgotten and then remembered just enough to keep me quiet. Thanksgiving dinner was a different opera. That was when the Whitlows performed generosity for a crowd, with a turkey the size of a small car and a prayer longer than patience. I carved the bird and took the heat for whatever went wrong. Christmas. Well, Christmas was when the tree leaned toward the living room and every gift tag knew how to spell Brooke and Chase. I kept the boxes from last year and pretended they were new. At dusk I walked out to the west stacks, where the light falls flat and a person can think about leaving. Laura's note said to meet at a diner on the highway at 2:10 in the afternoon. She knew better than to ask me to show up at 12 on the dot. Hank followed patterns. I survived by breaking them. I tucked my notebook deeper in my boot. Pages filled with license plates and weights that never matched the invoices. You can call it a hidden truth, or you can call it manipulation with receipts. Either way, it is evidence. I had asked for a promotion 3 times. I had been told no 3 times. The reason changed with the season. Too young. Too jumpy. Too dumb. The truth was simpler. Men who run toxic family operations do not promote the kid they think they own. They keep him just scared enough to obey. Marla loved a confrontation if she had an audience. Alone. She preferred injustice delivered like a lullaby. God sees everything, she would say when she docked my pay for a mistake I did not make. So do I told her once. But only when she had already turned away. When I walked into the diner that day, Laura had a second cup on the table, and a file that made my hands sweat. "Do you have a grandmother?" she asked. The question pinched a nerve I did not know I had. "Not here," I said. "Maybe somewhere." Laura nodded. "Vivian's mother, Evelyn, never moved from the coast. She is the kind of woman who saves every letter in a shoebox. She is the kind of grandmother who leaves the porch light on." I did not say it. But I wanted to. I wanted someone to have left a light on for me. We talked about inheritance like it was a wild animal you can coax closer if you do not look directly at it. "A will is a map," Laura said. "But a map is not a destination." We needed DNA. Yes. But we also needed to prove the pattern of control. We needed to show a judge that I had been excluded from every decision that mattered in my own life. We needed to protect the evidence I had collected and the boy who collected it. "You do not have to run tonight," Laura said. "But when the tables turn, they turn fast. Be ready." I went back to the yard and found Hank sitting on the porch with a beer and a smile I did not trust. "Boy," he said, "you think because you are 18, you get to write your own rules." He took a long pull and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. "I am offering you a chance. Stay in line, and I will take care of you. Cross me, and you will find out what happens to strays." I smiled because sometimes that is the only weapon a person has. "What happens to strays?" I asked. He leaned forward. "They get put down." I touched the whistle in my pocket. Felt the dent where my thumbnail had pressed too hard. "We will see," I said. And the words tasted like the first bite of a ripe peach. Sweet and dangerous. You might expect the revenge to start with a grand gesture. Mine started with mild theft. I took my own birth certificate from the bottom drawer where Marla hid papers she could not afford to lose. I took a set of keys that fit locks I was never supposed to open. I took a breath in the middle of the night and held it until my chest hurt because I needed to know I was still the one in charge of my lungs. The hidden truth was not that I had a fortune waiting. The hidden truth was that I had always been worth more than the way they treated me. The money would be payback to the past. Yes. But the real tables turned the second I believed my name could belong to me again. Open loop. Here it is. There is a reason I am telling this to you. Especially if you are the kind of woman who knows the price of silence. I want you to know how the control worked, so you can feel the snap when it broke. I want you to smell the coffee at our so-called family breakfast, and recognize the manipulation when you see it across your own table. And I want you to know what I did next. Because it is the only part of this I can call mine. The first man I ever called father taught me to read tire treads, before he taught me to read people. The treads were honest. The people were not. When I look back now, I can see the small betrayals piled up like scrap. They were not accidents. They were a system. Marla never swung a belt. Not where it would show. She weaponized chores and hunger and a chilly shoulder. Hank curated humiliation like it was a craft. Brooke and Chase grew up in the soft center of that world. Glossy and loud. And if they ever noticed the way the house tilted against me, they never said, not out loud. The family business swallowed every weekend and justified every sin. Whitlow Metals paid cash when it suited and changed stories when it did not. I was the first one up and the last one blamed. Thanksgiving dinner was performance art. Marla would place her hand on my shoulder for the prayer, like a loving mother, and squeeze hard enough to bruise. When the words ended, she would let go and I would feel owned again. If there was a sermon about injustice, she would nod along and meet my eyes with a look that said, "Do not even try to call this what it is. You do not have the vocabulary." I did not then. But I do now. It was manipulation. It was favoritism. It was a toxic family humming under a pretty hymn. On my last high school report card, I had near-perfect attendance and better than decent grades. The principal called Marla to recommend me for a vocational scholarship and a part-time promotion at the County Works garage. She told him I had trouble with authority. The job went to another kid. That same week, Hank handed me a half-dollar raise and a schedule that stole my Sunday mornings. He said it was a promotion. I said thank you and learned another lesson. Sometimes a slap comes dressed as a handshake. Birthdays were either forgotten or turned into unpaid overtime. My 18th started with a lawn chair on the porch and ended with a midnight shift on the east fence. Christmas morning, I was a shadow in the kitchen making cinnamon rolls I never ate. It sounds small. And maybe it is small. But small cuts become scars you rub without thinking. When you are excluded from the table enough times, you begin to stand on purpose. You begin to think standing is a virtue. That is how injustice becomes a habit. I told Laura all this in the diner with a coffee that tasted like burnt hopes. She listened the way a good lawyer listens. Past the words and into the wound. She asked for specifics and I gave her specifics. The time Hank had me stand outside in August until the skin lifted off my palms after a bad weld cost him money. The time Marla forgot to put my name on the guest list for Brooke's Sweet 16 and then told everyone I was working because I preferred it. The time Chase laughed and said the whistle was funny and then made 2 clicks just to test how fast I would move. I hated myself for moving. I moved anyway. Do you have anyone? Laura asked. A teacher. A neighbor. A grandmother figure. Anyone who can stand up and say you are not imagining this. I told her about Ms. Dorothy next door, who brought me a casserole the winter the pipes burst and Hank made me mop alone. I told her about Coach Albright who said, "The world will try to convince you your worth is a wage. Do not you dare believe it." She wrote those names down like they were gold. What about a wedding? She asked. And I blinked. Brooke is getting married in the spring. I said, why? Because ceremonies make people show their real face. Laura said, and a wedding is a stage. If we need to, we can use the audience. She slid a second folder across the table. Inside were copies of a will and a trust instrument with my real name, printed clean. I traced the letters with my thumb the way a boy might trace his own outline on a wall. Graham built the company with Vivian. Laura said gently, he was the builder. She is the keeper. He made sure your inheritance could not be stolen by anyone who did not love you. I thought of Hank's red pen. I thought of Marla's ledger. I thought about how they told me saving was a virtue while they spent on everything that glittered if it could be photographed. What if they fight? I asked. What if they drag me into court and call me a liar? Laura smiled a tired smile. Then, we welcome the confrontation. She said, we bring the receipts and the neighbors and the judge who has seen this before. We let your story sit under oath, and we let their story sit under light. She tapped the table lightly. The tables will turn. Karma is not a plan. Read. But it loves a paper trail. I left the diner with a task list that did not fit in my pocket. Protect the notebook. Photograph the false weights. Keep the burner phone charged. Avoid the porch when Hank drank. If anyone asked where I went, I was to say the county library. Because in our town the word library makes people's eyes glaze over. Back home, Marla was arranging silk flowers for the church potluck. She looked me up and down like a store clerk trying to decide if I could afford anything on the shelf. There is a man coming by about a promotion, she said sweetly. You smile and say thank you. And you do not ask for more money. Gratitude opens doors. I nodded and set the flowers where she wanted them. The man never came. Gratitude did not open any door that mattered. Later, when I dared to ask what happened, she said, he saw your attitude and chose someone else. I had been in the yard all day. My attitude had been sweat and silence. That night, Hank staged another drill. He cut the power to the rear lot and waited to see if I would panic. Think fast. He yelled. One day this will be real. I thought faster than he expected. I took the back route, climbed the fence, and circled behind him. Boo. I said. Because sometimes a boy gets to be a boy. Hank spun and caught himself. And I saw a flicker of fear he tried to turn into rage. You trying to be funny, he said, stepping close enough for me to smell the beer. I looked down at his boots. Scuffed and mean. No. I said. Quiet. I am trying to be free. When the house settled into that thin sleep noise that trailer walls make, I slid into the laundry room and opened the metal cabinet where Marla kept the important. A binder held our family business tax returns, which is to say a curated fiction. Behind it lay a carved wooden box that did not belong in our house. The hinges were polished. The inside was velvet, It held a bracelet that would have looked right in a magazine ad, and a letter with my real name on it. I mouthed the words. Not ready to make sound. Dear Julian. It began. And I had to sit down on the washer. The rest of the letter will matter later. For now, know this. Someone had tried to reach me before Laura ever found me. Marla had stolen more than wages. She had stolen my mail. I tucked the letter into my boot and slid the box back exactly the way I found it. Then I did the bravest small thing I had done in years. I folded the laundry I had not dirtied and left it neat on the chair. There are people who will understand what that means and people who never will. If you are the first kind. I am telling this for you. The next morning, Marla announced a family field trip to church, which meant she wanted an audience for whatever came next. She did not say the word confrontation, but I smelled it like smoke. Hank ironed a shirt and told me to shine his boots. Brooke debated centerpieces on speakerphone. Chase twirled keys to a truck that did not belong to him when he got it but somehow did now. I slipped the letter deeper into my boot and counted the minutes until I could meet Laura again. Until the judge. The will. The inheritance. The woman who kept a porch light on could form a shield around my name. Laura chose the county library because the librarian believed in privacy like it was a religion. She set us up in a corner room with walls painted the color of lake water and a door that closed soft. The private investigator was already there. A compact man with a sun-leathered face and a hat that had seen more honest work than a politician. Redden Cole. He said, shaking my hand. I am here to help you get the truth from the weeds. He laid out a timeline on the table with little colored flags for each event. My birth. The day I disappeared from a park whose name I had never heard, because nobody who raised me ever talked about parks. A flurry of searches. A ransom call that never came. Another color for another city. Then a pause. Years where my life is a line with no annotations, because who would write my story except me? And then, suddenly, a letter in a velvet box that never reached me. That box means someone close to you has a conscience. Redden said, or a guilty streak. Either one will do. Laura pulled a blue folder from her bag. The legal spine stiff and certain. This is the will, she said. Graham set aside a trust for you and stipulated that if you were ever found, Vivian would bring you home before the board took any vote about the company's future. That is Pierce Meridian. Julian. It is not a mom-and-pop shop. I could hear my own laugh rattle against the walls. I have spent my life sweeping metal shavings. I said, home is not a word I trust. Redden slid over a stack of photos. My mother. Vivian. In a navy dress that made her look both fragile and fierce. Standing on the steps of a Park Heights mansion that felt like a movie set to my desert eyes. My grandmother. Evelyn. Silver hair, like a crown. Soft hand on Vivian's arm. A framed photo on a table behind them showed a toddler with my eyes. My stubborn chin. That boy wanted to be a firefighter. Laura said softly. He said it every time someone asked. He is still in there. I did not want to cry in a county library. I did. Anyway. Slow, so the librarian would not have to shush me. We talked practical. DNA. Chain of custody. How to handle a confrontation if Hank or Marla cornered me before we were ready. Do not make speeches. Redden said, people like that do not listen to words. They listen to leverage. If they come at you, you leave. If they show you a paper, you do not sign. If they tell you a judge will laugh, understand that judges have seen every kind of family drama there is. Yours will not be the first betrayal they have read into the record. I handed over my notebook. Laura smiled like I had just brought in an extra witness. You wrote down the license plates, she said. Flipping pages. You noted weights, times, faces, which supervisor was on duty. This is what a promotion should be based on. Not flattery. Not blood. Competence. Redden taped my pages to his timeline like puzzle pieces clicking into place. This here looks like insurance fraud, he said. And if there is one thing, county inspectors and federal agents both love. It is a paper trail with numbers that refuse to behave. Marla texted while we worked. Little bubbles of control disguised as concern. Where are you? Are you taking the truck? Do not forget to pick up Brooke's dress. Each one landed like a tap on my skull. Laura did not tell me to block her. She told me to breathe in for 4 and out for 6, and answer only what kept me safe. I wrote, "At the library," and left it at that. "Tell me about holidays," Laura said then. And I knew she was building toward the day we would have to show an audience what had been hidden. I described Thanksgiving dinner like a stage play with assigned roles and no grace. I described Christmas morning like a catalog that never arrived in my mailbox. I described my birthday as a punchline. My wedding, I could not describe my wedding because Marla liked to say boys like me should be grateful if anyone ever bothered to love us. "We will rewrite that scene later," Laura said. "For now, Brooke's wedding will do. Big events reveal cracks." Before I left, Redden handed me a cheap key phone with 3 numbers programmed. Laura. Redden. A local lawyer they trusted if I got picked up and needed a voice before a judge in the middle of the night. "We do not plan for bad luck," Redden said. "We plan for people who think luck is theirs to sell." Back at the yard, the air had sharpened. Hank's smile was too wide. Marla's eyes were too bright. We thought about a little celebration. She cooed, holding a paper plate with a slice of store cake. "You only turn 18 once." I watched the candle smoke curl and wondered whose idea of kindness this was. "Make a wish," Brooke said. "Filming." Chase leaned in and whispered a word that rhymes with quitter. I wished for a judge brave enough to call a spade a spade. I wished for a grandmother to hold my face in both hands like it was something precious, and say my name slow. After the singing that was not really singing, Hank took me aside. "Good news," he said. "We are moving you up." I waited. "More hours," he said. "More responsibility." I nodded because a boy who wants to live to see tomorrow picks his battles. "Any chance that comes with more pay?" I asked. A test I knew I would fail. Hank laughed. "Your pay is a roof and a plate," he said. "That is how family works." I thought of the will in Laura's bag and the mansion on a hill, and the way real families feed you without asking for a signature. "Sometimes," I said, "family works different." That night, I hid the letter in the one place I knew Marla would not touch under Hank's seat in the old pickup he never let anyone drive. I slept with my boots on and the burner phone under my pillow. At 12:41 in the morning, the headlights of an unfamiliar truck slid across the wall of my room. I got up and moved to the dark. The way a guard dog learns to live in shadows. Only this time, I was not thinking about how to protect their property. I was thinking about how to protect my name. The cliffhanger is simple. I was not the only person who knew something had shifted. Hank started keeping a hammer by the door. Marla started humming hymns in minor keys. Brooke scheduled a dress fitting and made a point of telling me I was not invited to the ceremony. "Guests only," she said. "Not help." I smiled because some insults are gifts. They tell you exactly where to stand while you plan your exit. Tomorrow, I would meet Laura again. Tomorrow, we would hand the judge a story with edges sharp enough to cut. The first time I saw the hidden ledger, I was looking for a wrench. Tools clatter when you are nervous. And nerves ran my hands like a puppeteer. The ledger lived in a false bottom under a drawer that never slid right. I pried it up with a screwdriver and stared at numbers that did not match the ones I had been taught. Marla's writing was tidy. Each 7 crossed. Each 0 closed like a secret. She logged deliveries for a company that did not exist in our county and listed drivers I had never seen. I took photos with the cheap phone. Each click a slow kind of joy. That afternoon a man in a suit showed up who did not belong in our yard. He had soft hands and impatient eyes. He asked Hank to step outside. People in suits think fences keep sound in. They do not. "We are done covering for you," the man said. "Get your house in order before the audit." Hank's face did a thing I had not seen before. It collapsed and then reformed. When he came back, he was sugar. "Promotion is off the table for now," he said, patting my shoulder like he had ever touched me with kindness. "New budget. Hard times." I nodded and slipped another receipt into my boot. Laura called with a plan. We would file an emergency petition under seal to protect my identity and my evidence. We would ask a judge for a preliminary order preventing destruction of records. We would quietly arrange a DNA swab through a clinic that did not ask questions. "This is not a raid movie," she said. "This is patient work. Revenge is not a scream. It is a well-placed whisper that turns into a verdict." I told Ms. Dorothy what I could without dragging her into danger. She gave me a slice of lemon pie and a stack of old blanket squares she had been quilting. Put them in your truck, she said. If you have to leave fast, you will be warm. She had raised 3 sons and a daughter on the east side of a town that forgot her zip code when it was convenient, and remembered it at election time. She knew betrayal when she saw it. You keep your eyes on the future, she said, tapping my temple. You let a judge worry about the past. Marla began a campaign to shame me wholly. She told the church I had a pride problem. She told the choir director I had a temper. She told the women at the thrift store that I had lost my way. The word she did not say was disobedient because that would have admitted there were orders to defy. She preferred to float above me. Pure and put upon. Favoritism is a balm to those who benefit, and a burn to those who do not. Brooke and Chase soaked in it like sunlight. Brooke planned her wedding with a spreadsheet and a sneer. No +1 for you, she said. We are limiting staff. Staff. There it was. The truth she had always believed about me. I spent the next week playing 2 roles. Guard dog by night. Plaintiff by day. Redden showed me how to be boring on purpose. You want them to underestimate you until it is too late, he said. Smile just enough. Not a lot. Write down your hours in pen. We built a case brick by brick. The will. The trust. The DNA swab. The photos of the ledger. Ms. Dorothy's statement about the winter. I slept in the shed with a space heater that wheezed like a sick cat, while Hank and Marla posted vacation photos from a beach I could not find on a map. Injustice is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is a sum. The night before the petition, Hank cornered me by the south fence. You been restless, he said, meaning I had stopped jumping at the whistle. You thinking you deserve more. He stepped close, breath hot with beer. Say it. He dared. Say you deserve more. My heart knocked against my ribs in a rhythm older than fear. I deserve a name that belongs to me. I said. I deserve a will read by a judge, with my mother's hand on my back. I deserve a table where I am not excluded. Hank blinked. Slow and mean. You like fancy words, he said finally. Remember who fed you. It was the oldest manipulation in the book. I gave him the oldest answer. I remember who starved me, I said, and walked away. At dawn, Laura filed the papers. At noon, a judge in a black robe wrote his name on an order that told Whitlow Metals not to burn, shred, or bleach a single page. At 2, Redden texted that a county inspector was scheduled for an unannounced visit. At 5, Hank called a family meeting and made a show of praying for protection. I kept my head down and my boots on. You cannot hear a table turn until after it has tipped, but you can feel the tilt if you pay attention. I went to sleep that night with a truth under my pillow like a tooth waiting for a ferry. In the morning, I would meet my mother. Laura said Vivian would fly in quiet. No press. No company handlers. Just a woman with a suitcase of hope, and a grandmother who kept her courage in a cardigan pocket. I had not let myself picture the mansion or the company boardroom or the promotion I might earn one day based on merit and not fear. I pictured a front door. I pictured a porch light left burning longer than necessary. I pictured a woman who would know my jawline at a glance and say my name in a way that braided the boy and the man and did not cut either strand. Cliffhanger. On cue. Brooke's wedding invitation landed on the kitchen table the next morning. My name was not on the envelope. Help was. I laughed, which made Marla flinch. You will get your turn, she said, which sounded like a threat and a promise. I tucked the invitation into my pocket. There are many ways to crash a wedding. Showing up as yourself is the most devastating. Meeting my mother was not fireworks and violins. It was a quiet door in a quiet motel, and a woman who took one step, then another, then another. Like she was crossing a fragile bridge. Vivian was smaller than I expected and stronger than any image could capture. Her hair was pulled back. Not to impress, but to stay out of the way. Her eyes were mine. Or maybe mine were hers. We did not hug like a movie scene where everything heals in a minute. We stood close enough for scent and memory to find us. She smelled like peppermint tea and paper. Julian, she said. And my name felt new and old at once. I missed you for years I did not get to live. I swallowed. Because a grown man cannot fit that many tears in one throat. I am here. I said, and meant it as a promise. Grandmother Evelyn had a smile that erased 2 decades of hard weather. She held my face in both hands like she was reminding God what she had ordered. "You grew into your chin," she said, and then laughed at herself. A simple sound that rewired something in me. She had a knitting bag and a tin of cookies, and the kind of calm people make jokes about, because they do not understand what it costs to cultivate. "We will not rush," she said. "We have a long weekend, and the rest of our lives." We talked in hours that felt like minutes. They told me stories about my first steps on a kitchen tile floor, about a grandmother who took me to a firehouse once a month because I was obsessed, about a father who built a company from a garage and a dream and still made it home for dinner as often as he could. They did not pretend there was no betrayal. They did not sugarcoat the years I missed. "I do not want revenge to be your whole story," Vivian said. "I do not want family drama to be the only genre your life fits in." I nodded because I had already felt that truth under my skin. "But I do want justice," she added. And then her eyes flashed. "And I will not apologize for that." Laura briefed us on the court calendar. A judge would hear our petition in chambers within a week. The DNA swab was logged and on a plane to a lab with a clean chain of custody. An investigator from a state agency had started asking questions about Whitlow Metals invoices that did not line up. We made a plan for safety and a plan for the wedding. "Do not bring fireworks," Evelyn said. "Bring facts." She handed me a handkerchief with my initials. Not RW. JP. She had sewn them herself in blue thread. I carried that cloth like a talisman. Back at the yard, Marla had a surprise waiting. "Family dinner," she sang, as if the word family did not splinter in her mouth. The table was set with the good plates that usually only came out for Thanksgiving. She placed me at the far end, under the drafty vent. "I have been thinking," she began, cutting her turkey into neat pieces. "We have been hard on you because the world is hard, and we wanted you strong. Manipulation works best when it mirrors a truth. The world is hard. But the way they had trained me was not strength. It was survival, with a cost." "That is kind," I said. "Neutral, as a winter sky." Hank grunted into his glass. "Then they tried money. We are willing to make it right," Hank said, sliding a check across the table with more zeros than I had ever seen on anything with my name. "Sign this agreement, and you will have a future." I did not pick up the paper. "I already have a future," I said. "I am asking for a past." Hank's jaw worked. "You do not want to fight me," he said. "I am a fighter. You are a bully," I replied. "There is a difference." Marla gave me that church lady look. "We took you in," she said. "You owe us gratitude." The word gratitude did not catch like it used to. It slid right off. "You took me," I said. "Then you took from me. A judge will decide what I owe." Chase decided he was a tough guy and stood too fast, his chair scraping loud. "You think a judge cares about some will from a fancy company," he said. He had learned to say company like an insult. "I think judges care about evidence," I said. "I think judges care about kids used as labor. I think judges care about insurance fraud." Marla went pale around the mouth. Hank reached for the check and tore it in half. "You cannot prove anything," he said. "I can," I answered. And for the first time in that house, I believed myself more than I feared them. I slept that night in Ms. Dorothy's spare room with her persnickety cat guarding the door. Laura did not want me in the trailer until the hearing. "They need you compliant," she said. "We need you breathing." I stared at the ceiling and listened to Ms. Dorothy hum an old hymn in the kitchen. It was not the one Marla liked. It was better. It was about a table big enough for anyone who was hungry. The next morning, Redden sent a text. "County Inspector at Whitlow Metals. Bring the ledger copies." I stood in the parking lot and watched from across the street as Hank tried to charm a man who did not know how to smile when he worked. The inspector measured and weighed and asked questions like he had all the time in the world. Marla fluttered and bluffed and brought out coffee that the inspector refused. When he left, Hank kicked a bucket so hard it dented the air. "You did this," Marla hissed at me. "No." I said, "You did this. I just stopped sweeping the evidence under your rug." Cliffhanger. The hearing was set for Friday. Brooke's wedding rehearsal dinner was set for Thursday night at a country club, with a chandelier that cost more than our yard cleared in a month. I had my invitation of sorts. Staff. I had a grandmother who could shoot a look across a room and make a bully reconsider his next line. I had a lawyer who sharpened hope into filings. I had a name I was not ready to say in that house, and a future I could finally see. I did not have peace yet. Peace would take longer. But I had momentum. And sometimes that is enough to carry a man through the nastiest valley he has ever seen. Vivian insisted we practice the introduction. He will say Reed, she said softly. You will say Julian. Not a fight. A correction. We were sitting in a motel room with curtains that did not meet in the middle. Daylight pushing through the gap, like it could not wait. Evelyn watched us like a coach before a championship. Breathe, she said at intervals. And we did. We drove to the country club early to walk the room before anyone else filled it. That is a trick I learned on the yard, and Stubborn Hope learned it too. The staff set white tablecloths with the precision of a parade. The chandelier dripped crystals like tears that got their act together. Brooke saw me first. Her mouth made a shape that was not quite a smile. You look almost decent, she said. Do not touch anything. There are rules about who can handle the silver. I almost laughed. Because there are always rules, and half the time they are made up by people who need to feel taller. I stood where I was told and waited for the show. Marla breezed in on a cloud of perfume. Hank trailed. Jaw already tight. Eyes sliding to my jacket like it offended him. Read, he said. Loud enough for nearby tables to turn. I kept my voice steady. Julian, I said. And the word hung there. Choosing a side. People will tell you confrontation should be avoided at weddings. Those people have never lived under a roof where every quiet moment is a setup, and every fight is a rehearsal. Brooke's fiancé. A man who loved his reflection more than he loved the vows he was about to take. Lifted his glass, and made a speech about family that included a joke about +1s and contributions. It landed like a dull knife. Evelyn was across the room. Small and unafraid. She sipped her tea with the serenity of a judge. Not the kind with a gavel. The kind who raised judges. Redden checked in by phone from the parking lot. I have eyes on the exits, he said. I do not think they will try anything tonight. But bullies do not like losing control. Keep your back to a wall. Laura slid in through the service entrance like a waitress who could bench press a lie. The judge moved the hearing up by 2 hours. She whispered. Someone is nervous and trying to hurry the fire. Marla saw us conferring and made a beeline. A smile that did not reach her eyes pinned to her face. Church friends, she announced to the room. This is Reed. He helps out at our family business. He is practically a son. I let the words sit long enough for people to nod. Then I said, calm as a lake. I am Julian Pierce. My mother, Vivian, will join us in a moment. Silence is heavy in a room like that. You can hear the air decide what it believes. Vivian crossed the floor in a blue dress that made people sit up straighter without knowing why. She looked at me first, and then at Marla. Thank you for keeping my son alive, she said. And the kindness of it broke something in me. Then she added, we will handle the rest from here. Hank's lip curled. Lady, he said. You do not know what you are walking into. Evelyn appeared at his elbow like a lesson. I have been walking into men like you since before you learned how to tie those shoes, she said. Sweet as tea and sharp as a tack. Back up. The rehearsal resumed because money keeps trains on schedule. I carried chairs in from a back room because old habits do not evaporate in a day. Chase tried to trip me. And I did not move. Brooke made a joke about staff again. And Laura wrote down the time and the words, because she is a lawyer, and she knows that petty cruelty can win juries faster than grand speeches. When it was over, Vivian hugged me for the first time. Not a long hug. Not a desperate one. A promise. Tomorrow, she said, we show a judge the ledger and the will and your name. Then we go home and light a porch lamp and bake a pie your grandmother has perfected. We walked out together, and the club manager chased us with a bill that Marla had tried to stick to me. Vivian handed over a card and a smile that said, not today. In the parking lot. Redden tipped his hat. Nice family, he said dry. The new one. I replied. Yes, he said. The new one. When I slept that night, I dreamed in two kitchens. One smelled like grease and fear. One smelled like lemon and flour, and a window left open just enough to let the afternoon in. In the first kitchen, I wiped counters until my knuckles cracked. In the second, my grandmother handed me a wooden spoon and said, "Taste." When I woke, the difference felt like a line I could step over if I kept my feet steady. The hearing took place in a courtroom with bad lighting and a bench that made the judge look like he could bless or break you. Laura went first, laying out the will and the inheritance without theatrics. Redden introduced my notebook and the ledger photos. Ms. Dorothy spoke about blankets and busted pipes, and the way a boy can disappear in plain sight when parents love the applause more than the child. Hank's lawyer tried to turn the thing into a misunderstanding, a misplaced adoption, a bureaucratic hiccup. The judge did not blink. "Your client's paperwork is counterfeit," he said finally, "and his attitude is contempt." Marla stood to speak, a hand over her heart like a Hallmark card. "We did our best," she said. "He should be grateful." The judge looked at me then. "Son," he said, "gratitude is not a legal requirement when a person's rights have been trampled." He signed the order as if he were signing a check I had already earned. Emergency custody to Vivian until a full hearing could be held. A temporary injunction forbidding the destruction of records at Whitlow Metals. A request to the state to open a fraud investigation. My name, Julian Pierce. Printed where I could read it from the cheap seats. I did not cheer. I breathed. The first free breath of my adult life. On the way out, Marla hissed, "You will regret this." I did not stop walking. "I regret staying silent." I said, "Not this." Hank reached like he might grab my arm. Redden stepped between us with a look that said, "Please try it." And Hank thought better. Brooke watched from the corner with eyes that looked like a mirror that hated what it saw. "You ruined my wedding," she said. "I improved your guest list," I said, "because I am not as holy as my grandmother would like." Cliffhanger. The fraud team hit Whitlow Metals at dawn the next day, and Hank called everyone he could think of to pull strings that no longer existed. Brooke moved the wedding inside and cut staff to keep me out. Chase posted a video calling me a traitor and a thief. The comments were a mix of amen and how dare he. And finally, someone said it. What mattered was not their opinion. What mattered was this: the table had turned. I would not sit at the end of it again. You learn a lot about people when a judge adjusts the seating chart of their life. Hank hit the anger stage at full speed, passed denial like a car on a country road, and parked in bargaining. "Take a settlement," he said through his lawyer. "We will apologize in church." I had to laugh. Payback is not a microphone. I said, "It is a ledger balanced and a name restored." Vivian nodded. And I wondered if the boy who wanted to be a firefighter had known he would one day love a woman who could see justice without squinting. The next legal step was a formal reading of the will in a wood-paneled room that smelled like old books and new hope. A company representative read Graham's words. He had been careful. Even in grief, the inheritance was not a blank check. It was a structure for growth. Oversight until my 30th birthday. Education funds. And a seat at a table where experience and ethics mattered. "You are not a mascot," the representative said after. "You are a partner when you are ready." It was not a promotion. It was an invitation. The difference warmed me from the inside. Brooke's wedding arrived like a storm you know will reroute the power. The venue had changed to a place with gates that buzzed when you pushed the button and a staff trained to keep out people who made trouble. Vivian did not want me to go. Evelyn did. "There is a woman who is your mother," she said to Vivian. "But there is a man who is your son. He needs to see how tables look when they are set for people who never considered him human." Evelyn has a way of winning arguments with gentleness so firm you cannot wiggle free. I put on a suit that fit like an apology for all the years I wore hand-me-downs a size too large. I brought the invitation that said staff and a lawyer who knew the manager from a charity gala. We stood in the entry while they debated policy. "He is family," the manager said finally. "Not tonight," Marla snapped. But the manager had already waved me through. A friend in the crowd called, "Good for him." And I tried not to flinch at the word him instead of boy. The ceremony was sincere if you like sincerity that ignores the obvious. The vows sounded like they had been borrowed from a magazine. When the pastor who had prayed over our Thanksgiving table with polished compassion asked if anyone objected, no one, including me, spoke. I am not in the business of wrecking weddings. I am in the business of wrecking lies. That happened slowly, with documents and decisions and dinner tables rebuilt piece by piece. At the reception, Brooke made a toast that was a dagger wrapped in lace. To family, she said, eyes scanning for me. The ones who show up, not the ones who show off. I kept my mouth shut and then opened it in the one direction that mattered. I walked to the grandmother in Hank's side of the family who had never looked me in the eye and said, "Would you like a seat? This one is mine and I am happy to stand." Vivian pinched my arm lightly, a code for, "You are doing fine." Hank tried a final stunt. He cornered me near the kitchen and offered the same torn check in a new envelope. "Be reasonable," he said. "Men handle business." Behind him, the chef shook his head minutely. A stranger more on my side than the man who had turned a whistle into a collar. "Reasonable is for later," I said. "Right now. I am going to eat cake with my mother and let karma do what it does best." He laughed. But it had the sound of a man at the end of his list. On Monday, the investigators came back with more questions and a warrant. The hidden ledger had a twin Hank did not think we would find. We did. The weights were wrong. The invoices did not match. The company he had used as a shield did not exist in this county. The state had a word for that: fraud. The penalty for it would not fix my childhood, but it would put a dent in Hank's jawline that no smile could hide. Cliffhanger. The holiday season came early that year because Vivian wanted to fill the calendar with small joys while the court took its slow steps. She invited me to set the table for a Thanksgiving dinner where no one had to pretend. She asked me to pick a tree tall enough to scrape the ceiling at Christmas, and let me choose ornament colors without a committee. It sounds trivial. It is not. When you have been excluded your whole life, being asked to decide between red ribbon and white lights is a revolution. But before we could hang a single ornament, Hank filed a lawsuit claiming I had slandered him and stolen his business secrets. The hearing was set for the week after Thanksgiving. I have never been more grateful for pie. Thanksgiving at Evelyn's house smelled like butter and boundaries held. She set out place cards with a fountain pen and wrote my name in a script that made it look like the title of a novel. "You sit here," she said, tapping the chair at Vivian's left, close enough to pass the rolls and far enough to take a breath if the past walks in. The past did try. Hank called twice during grace. Marla texted a photo of a turkey and the caption, "You will miss us when we are gone." The phone stayed face down on the counter, and the prayer made it to amen without a tremble. We went around the table and said what we were grateful for. I said my name out loud and did not blush. I said my grandmother's porch light. I said my mother's stubborn spine. I did not say revenge. Not because I did not want it, but because what I wanted more was repair. After dinner, Vivian handed me a box with a ribbon. Inside was a working whistle. "If you ever need help," she said, "this is what you blow." I laughed until I cried. Evelyn patted my hand. "You blow it for joy, too," she said. "Not just danger." The hearing on Hank's suit was a master class in tables turning. His lawyer made pretty speeches. Our lawyer made short ones. The judge asked Hank to explain the fake company entries and the missing invoices. Hank tried a joke. The judge did not smile. "Sir," the judge said, "this courtroom is not a platform for family performance. It is a place for facts." He dismissed Hank's suit with words that landed like gravel. "You do not get to sue the truth because it hurts your feelings." Back at Whitlow Metals, the sign went down within a month. The county seized property pending fines and back taxes. Men who had called me boy their whole lives called me sir in the grocery line and pretended they had always believed me. Karma is not a straight line. It loops and tangles and sometimes stops to catch its breath. But it has a way of returning the mail you thought was lost. Vivian eased me into Pierce Meridian without ceremony. I started in logistics because that is where I live: inventory, routes, timing, the undercurrent that makes visible success possible. My supervisor was a woman with a laugh like a church bell and a zero-tolerance policy for laziness. She did not care who my father had been. She cared whether I could build something that held on a windy night. After a month, she said the word promotion and meant it. I cried in the break room in private and then sent Ms. Dorothy Flowers, because she taught me how to take pride in work, without letting work devour me. The first Christmas light I plugged in at Evelyn's house lit the whole living room like a warm apology. We hung ornaments and drank cocoa with too many marshmallows, and told the story of the time toddler. Julian knocked over a menorah at a neighbor's party, and no one yelled. Vivian gave me a stocking with my initials embroidered, and a note inside that said, "Keep a suitcase by the door. But not for running from now on. For traveling." In that moment, payback tasted like peppermint. The revenge I had wanted the year before felt smaller than this joy. Cliffhanger. New Year's Day. Brooke sent me a wedding photo with the caption, "Hope you find happiness in your new mansion." It sounded like jealousy in a dress. I started to type a reply, and then Evelyn, who sees everything, put a hand on my wrist. "We do not text the past from the future," she said. "We live here now." The next morning, Redden called. "One more loose thread," he said. "A letter that never made it to your mother. Sent from your old house years ago. Might be a secret you want to see. Might be another layer of betrayal. Meet me at the diner." I went because loose threads pull at me until I cannot sleep. The letter was written in a slanted hand I recognized even before Redden said the name. Marla. It was a demand dressed as a plea. She had written to Vivian years after the first searches went quiet, hinting that she knew where I was. Asking for money to keep me safe. Promising anonymous updates. "If you love the boy," the letter said, "you will pay." No signature. No return address. But enough fingerprints of language to make a judge nod. Redden laid it flat on the table and put a tiny weight on each corner. Like a scientist. She always knew. I said, more to myself than to him. She always chose. We took the letter to Laura, who added it to the growing file. "This changes the tone," she said. "It does not change the truth. But it changes how we tell it." She did not mean in court. That part was already underway. She meant in my chest. There is a difference between being forgotten and being withheld. One is a wound that scabs. The other is a wound that keeps reopening because the person who cut you will not stop. I drove to Ms. Dorothy's and sat on her porch steps until the afternoon turned a kind of gold that forgives nobody and forgives everybody. She brought me iced tea and a look that said, "Talk when you want or not at all." I did both. Vivian listened to the letter with her head tipped like she was catching a faint sound. "She will have to answer for this," she said finally. The calm of a woman who knows the long game. Evelyn wrapped me in a hug that smelled like lemon and wool. "You are not a secret anymore," she said. "Say it." I did. "I am not a secret." I said it again until it felt like something I could stand on. Spring brought rain and a court date. The full hearing on custody and the crimes that had danced around my childhood finally had its day. The courtroom was full of faces I knew and faces I did not. All of them learning what I had carried alone. Laura stood as if her feet had roots. She walked the judge through evidence like a pastor who refuses to rush because the truth can handle a slow telling. Hank stared out the window as if the sky could rescue him. Marla cried in a way that gathered sympathy until the letter came out. Then even her sister shifted away. The judge's decision was a quilt of language. Clear. Measured. Firm. Vivian's custody made permanent. A recommendation to the district attorney for charges. An admonition to the congregation that had clapped for Marla's performative charity without ever knocking on my door to check if I was eating. "Family is not a word you get to weaponize," he said. I did not cheer. I breathed. Again. And this time my breath expanded enough to make room for a future that included more than courtrooms. Vivian had one more surprise, and one I did not know how to receive. She had saved a small house in a neighborhood near the water. Not the mansion on the hill, but a place with a blue door and a lemon tree out back. "Your father wanted you to have somewhere simple to learn how to rest," she said. "You can move there when you want." I did not cry. For once. I walked to the dry sink and turned the tap just to hear water in a room that had been waiting for the sound of my life. Cliffhanger Hank posted bond and refused to go quietly. He threatened to tell lies. The kind that take a long time to clean up even after people know better. "We will not play whack-a-mole," Laura said. "We will make one statement. And then we will let the case talk." The statement was mine to deliver. It would air on local news and sit on a website where the comments would do what comments always do. Vivian asked me if I was sure. I said yes. Because some doors a man needs to close with his own hand. I wore a jacket that did not belong to anyone else, and stood in front of a camera that reminded me of the way Marla's eyes used to look when she was trying to trap me into a confession. Say your name. The producer said. I did. I told the story in a chorus of present and past. I did not use the word revenge. I used the word repair. I used the words family business, and toxic family, and favoritism, and will and inheritance, and excluded, and finally, included. I spoke to the women who had fed me from their pantries when I was a boy who mowed lawns for cash. I spoke to the grandmother who had waited with a porch light. The interviews led to phone calls I had not expected. A judge who had retired wrote me a note that said, "Keep going." A lawyer who had started in legal aid offered to mentor me if I went back to school. A company owner who had grown up poor said my resume belonged on her desk when I was ready. People like to cheer when the tables turn. But the good ones do more than clap. They bring chairs. I was not done with the past. There was one more scene I had to write clean. And that was the day I walked back into Whitlow Metals, after the county posted the seizure notice. The gate hung open. A mouth without a tooth. I walked the yard the way you might visit the site of an old injury. The south fence was quiet. The ledger drawer sat in the sun like it had never meant anything to anyone. I stood where Hank had told me I was a stray, and let the grief out, in a sound that was not pretty. Then I picked up a bolt with rust flaking like old paint and put it in my pocket. A souvenir. Not of pain, but of endurance. Pierce Meridian opened a community program in Sunfield 6 months later. Scholarships for kids who could fix things with their hands. Apprenticeships that paid a living wage. A workshop run by Ms. Dorothy, who taught teenagers to cook something that felt like home. Vivian did not put my name on any of it because she knows the difference between generosity and branding. Evelyn did sew a quilt for the program's front room. A pattern of tables turned into bridges. Cliffhanger. The final court date on Hank and Marla's charges fell the week before Christmas. I did not want to spend December in a courtroom. But some gifts come wrapped in official paper. The prosecutor asked me if I would give a statement about impact. I wrote it slowly. At the kitchen table in the blue doorhouse. While the lemon tree tapped the window like a friend who cannot stay long but wants you to know they came. The courtroom in December looked less hostile with wreaths on the doors. Hank wore a suit he did not deserve. Marla wore contrition like a scarf. Their lawyer tried to make a case for suspended sentences. The judge had read my letter and a stack of others. Ms. Dorothy wrote about the night she heard me coughing in the cold and left soup on the step. Coach Albright wrote about a boy who showed up even when showing up hurt. Evelyn wrote one line that I suspect the judge read twice. Punishment without change is theater. Punishment with change is mercy. I stood and read my statement without my voice breaking. I told the court that I wanted accountability more than I wanted spectacle. I said the words, betrayal and injustice and manipulation, and I did not apologize for the size of my feelings. I asked for a sentence that said to people like Hank and Marla that children are not labor, and wages are not shackles, and a will is not a suggestion. The judge nodded slowly. And I knew I had hit the note he needed. The sentence was not movie dramatic. It was real. Fines that would sting. Restitution that would repair. Community service that would plant them in the places they had ignored. A ban on operating any business that touched public funds. A line in the record that would follow them longer than a rumor. They did not look at me when it was over. They looked at the floor. The floor did not look back. On the courthouse steps. Reporters lifted microphones like flowers. I thanked the judge and my lawyers and the neighbors. I did not mention revenge. I did mention karma. Because sometimes a small word nails the truth to the door better than a speech. We went home and baked cookies and played a card game that my grandmother swears improves the mind. The tree at Vivian's house glowed like it had memorized a better future. Cliffhanger. It is hard to write a cliffhanger after a gavel falls. But life is not neat. Brooke sent a birth announcement in the spring with a name that reminded me of the boy I used to be. I wrote a note back that said, "You can do better than we were taught." Enclosed was a photo of a tiny wooden chair. Part of a set Ms. Dorothy's program had made. If Brooke never replied, that would be fine. I have learned to send love into rooms where it may or may not be received. That is not payback. That is practice. A year later, I stood at a barbecue in the Sunfield community lot, while a new class of apprentices showed off welded garden art that looked like hope in steel. The whistle Vivian gave me hangs on a hook by my door now. I blow it sometimes for joy when the lemon tree is heavy and the house smells like cinnamon. The mansion on the hill is still there, but it is not the center of my life. The blue door house is, and the workshop, and the people who learned my name without asking what I could do for them first. If you are listening and you are a woman who has kept a porch light on for someone who refuses to come home, I want you to hear this part as if I am at your kitchen table. Revenge got me moving. Justice kept me standing. Repair taught me to sit down and eat. The family drama did not evaporate in a miracle. It quieted until the only sound left was laughter and forks, and the low conversation of people who do not need to perform to be real. I am not excluded anymore. At Thanksgiving dinner, I carve the turkey and steal a roll, and get yelled at for taking it before grace. At Christmas, I wrap gifts badly and nobody jokes about staff. At birthdays, we sing loud and off-key, and there is always a cake that says my name all the way to the edge. When promotion comes, it is because I earned it. When a lawyer calls, it is to ask if I will speak to a class about how systems change. When a judge nods at me in a hallway, it is because he remembers a letter that did not beg for pity, just asked for a fair shake. There is a wedding in my future, not Brooke's, mine. The woman I love knows how to rebuild a small engine and how to make tea like my grandmother does. The vows we write will not come from a magazine. They will come from a kitchen where lemon trees tap the window and a cat that thinks he owns the place pretends to sleep. My parents will stand up with me. My sister and brother will come if they want to meet the version of me that does not flinch at whistles. If they do not, there will still be enough chairs. Here is your CTA. Because stories on the internet want a button, but I am old-fashioned and prefer an invitation. If you have a story where the tables turned and your name got returned to you, tell me in the comments so someone younger can borrow your courage. If you want more stories where betrayal burns off and what is left is dignity, subscribe, and you can sit with us next time. And if you are holding on to a secret that is carving you up from the inside, find a lawyer, find a neighbor, find a grandmother with a porch light, and go home. The door is open,